Welcome to the world of behavioralism, where we explore the impact of surroundings on living creatures and their perception of the environment. Discover how our surroundings shape our behavior and perception. Behavioralism reveals the impact of surroundings on living creatures in the way they perceive their multidimensional environment by inheriting certain spatial decision-making mechanism as they portray their conceived understanding. Explore real-life examples of how surroundings impact behavior and perception. Cultural determinism, the power of cultural surroundings on behavior. Professor Carl Sauer's cultural determinism stressed the cultural surrounding significance over human interactional behavior. Witness the diverse cultural environments that shape our actions. Geosophy, studying geography from different perspectives and views. Professor John Kirtland Wright emphasized the imaginative curiosity in developing perceptual environment and introduced Geosophy for studying geography regarding any kind of view. Discover how geographical landscapes impact our behavior. Environmental perception, understanding how we perceive our surroundings. The cognitive processes are behavioral environmental perception that Professor F. P. Gulliver explained as direction finding through maps in 1907, which later being recognized by physicist Professor C. C. Trowbridge's egocentric orientational reference system for location spotting during 1913. Gestalt theory, a model that explains behavior synthesis based on perceived surroundings. Learn how Gestalt theory helps us understand our behavior in relation to our surroundings. Professor William Kirk in 1952 developed a Gestalt theory-based understanding model that accounted perceived surroundings for behavior synthesis rather than objective environment. Spatial cognition, the understanding and perception of our surroundings. See how spatial cognition influences our decision-making process. Professor Kenneth Boulding in 1956 portrayed that human knowledge about surroundings evolved as an image, which being further illustrated by architect Professor Kevin Lynch in his book, The Image of the City: Behavioral Geography, exploring how the environment shapes our behavior. The surroundings understanding bearing mental map consists of 5 repetitive characteristics of all-around places, i.e. paths, nodes, edges, landmarks and districts. Discover fascinating research and case studies in behavioral geography. Professor David Lowenthal in 1961 introduced influential work, Geography, Experience and Imagination collaborated environmental psychology with geographic fieldwork. Behavioral genesis being motivated by Professor J. K. Wright's notion that people used to reside in narrowed provincial parochial worlds of cultural conservative custom guidance accompanied by some sorts of choice-based acceptance from the outer realms. Professor Peter Gould simulated African farmers' uncertain cultivational traits through game theory motivation in 1963, which modified the spatial analysis view regarding farming know-how and possible rational economic opportunities. Professor Julian Wolpert in 1964 carried out a Swedish farming decision-making analysis for potential yields that shown Professor Simon Coyne's satisficing behavior. Professor Thomas Saarinen used thematic apperception test in 1966 for drought-prone Great Plains analysis, recognized experience-based biased perception behavior. Professor Alan Pred industrial locational analysis in 1967, conveyed a satisficing behavior. In 1971, Professor Brian Goody demonstrated perception of the environment in his egocentric spatial hierarchy of perceived spaces. The hierarchical core consisted of personal space as well as intimately familiar places. Thereafter, persistent visiting places of varying frequency up to distant places, far places. Recognition could be based on externally notified different feedbacks, and spatial distance might be fabricated personally. Spatial schemata, frameworks that shape our understanding of surroundings. Understand how spatial schemata influence our behavior and perception. Professor J. R. Gould in 1980 introduced an Introduction to Behavioral Geography that included a schematic framework for individual spatial cognition and behavior. The images and spatial schemata are cognitive behavioral mediators. The images are symbolic mental perceptual thought-based fabrication gained through prolonged observations. These images are remembrance of the surroundings whenever direct sensory observations are being recalled. The spatial schemata are frameworks within which one could assemble his understanding of surroundings, consisting of both past and present informational experiences. The personal traits, surroundings, customs as well as cognitive processes determine these images and spatial schemata. The information and decision filter inputs affect the information outputs. The feedback loops generate impulse at different categories to signify perception learning, ascertain meanings for understanding for future behavioral mending tactics. Explore how factors like temperature and humidity shape behavior in different regions. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploring the impact of surroundings on behavior and perception. Our environment shapes us in more ways than we realize.